Okay, welcome to the second video, which is Hydrozoa, the class Hydrozoa, and may carry on to class Scyphozoa, the true jellyfish. This is following on from Cnidaria 1, which is the overview video. So these things often are mistaken for plants, in the benthic form anyway. And this is why. You can see to the untrained eye that would look very much like a bushy type of kelp. And you'll probably recognize this from your diving, but we call this often hydroid fuzz because unless you are a specialist, it's often tough to identify the different species of these hydrozoans. A lot of them look very similar. If you look very, very closely at these little branches, you can see individual little partitions, which are the individual polyps. Here's another picture of a hydroid fuzz. Here is a little bit closer up one. If you look very closely, you can see the individual little tentacles. And this guy right here is a camouflaged arthropod, an amphipod, which we'll learn about later. Tree hydrozoans here, and these are stick hydrozoans, often mistaken for another type of crinoid starfish, which we'll talk about later. So they form colonies of asexually derived polyps. They'll start from a single settled polyp, and then they will bud off and form large colonies. Here are solitary hydroids that have budded off and give this hermit crab a little bit of protection, as well as the hermit crab moving around and giving these things access to a constantly changing food supply. All those hydroid fuzzes you saw before were also colonies of asexually budded polyps. This is another type of colony, a blue bottle Portuguese man of war. Often they're benthic. They usually are stuck to the bottom. The man of war that we just saw before was the exception, which is considered planktonic. But even so, all of the majority of the polyps are stuck to the floating portion of that colony. Okay, so here's what happens. They will bud off after the original one is settled. So the original one here, the big one, will grow. This big one will grow, and when it reaches to a certain point of maturity, it will bud off all these little polyps, and either they are protected by a shared collective sheath, or they'll be solitary. Same thing with the Portuguese man of war. All of these different polyps that are hanging around down here are actually individual organisms, or individuals of that collective organism, and they hang off of this air-filled polyp. And we'll look at what the different types of polyps in a moment. So they can reach up to 2 millimeters in size, but most of the hydrozoans are quite small. The chitinous envelope secreted by the epidermis supports their colony. So this envelope that when you see that hydroid fuzz is a shared protective non-living skin, and the chitin is the same sort of thing that's in the crayfish skeleton or other arthropod skeletons. So let's look at the different types of zooids or polyps. Okay, the gastrozoids are the feeding polyps, specialized for digestion and share food with the rest of the colony. Gastro, again, we see the this root word, gastro, meaning of the stomach or of digestion. And so the sooner you start learning all these roots, the easier this type of thing will be. And then we have, where's my zooids? Whoops. There we go, zooids, which means an animal. Okay, a zooid is an animal. And then you have gonozoids, and let's see if we can figure out what gono might mean. Okay, gono or gonad, that's having to do with reproduction. So here in this picture of a hydroid colony, you can see the chitinous sheath that they're all sharing, and you can see the tentacles coming out, which would be the to catch prey, and these gonozoids, which can digest the food and then share it amongst the other organisms within the colony, amongst the other individuals, and share it down the central of the central portion of this sheath, because they are connected through microtubules that go from one to the next. And then this thing right here is a gonozoid, and inside the gonozoid, this transparent gonozoid, you can see these little individual the new individuals being formed. So these gonozoids are only concerned with carrying on the activities of reproducing new individuals. They leave the collecting and digesting food up to the gastrozoids, which then share the food that's digested to the rest of the colony. There's another type of zoid on some colonies, not all of them, but these ones are called dactylozoids, and they are only used for prey capture. So what happens is, in colonies that have dactylozoids, and you can see these cnidocyte laden little extensions, which are very lethal and used only for capturing prey. They will then transfer those to the digestive polyps, the gastrozoids, and not bother doing the digestion themselves. Here you can see the these long dactylozoids that have, groups of dactylozoids that are trailing from this man of war, hunting tentacles. In the blue bottles, there's the planktonic hydroids. There's another type of zoid called a pneumatophore. And its job is simply to float. It doesn't digest food. It gets digested food from gonozoids, and it acts as a sail to transport those tentacles through the water. So they're sweeping through the water, hopefully encountering more prey, and it also stays floating. And you can imagine how tough these things must have to be in order to put up with 4 or 5 meter swells and larger, breaking onto them, crashing onto them in the open ocean. And then you can see this part right here, which acts as a sail to catch the wind. Okay. They have asexual reproduction by budding, and then they also use sexual reproduction to produce gametes. And so either a medusa is released from the polyp, or from the gonozoids, from the colony, or the medusa might produce sperm or eggs and broadcast spawn those out. Let's have a look. So the eggs are often fertilized within the medusa and develop into the planular larva, like we saw in Porifera. They settle on the substrate, and then they grow the whole new colony. Here's a nice depiction of that life cycle. Okay, Okay, so here's your typical arborescent form of a hydroid. Okay, where you have your gonozoids and your gastrozoids, which also do the hunting. Okay, so they digest food, share it to the gonozoid. The gonozoid develops these little tiny medusas that break away, swim away, and they're either male or female. The male will release sperm, the female will capture it and incubate an egg, which is released and grows into the planular larva, just like we saw in porifera, which will settle onto the ground and become a new colony. The class Scyphozoa are a little bit more complex. They're slightly complex, and they are almost wholly medusa or the true jellyfish. So the medusa form in the hydrozoans is essentially just a reproductive form, whereas the Scyphozoans live their entire life cycle in the plankton. There's that lion's mane jellyfish we saw before. And the diversity of these things is amazing and very beautiful. It's really nice to be able to see these things going past on your dives. Here's another one. That one's actually a freshwater jellyfish. Here's some moon. Common one around here. And this one's backlit, doesn't glow. But they're a little bit more specialized for their midwater lifestyle with a thicker mesoglia layer, and that's why they get so much bigger. You'll only see tiny little medusas of hydroids, but you can get the lion's mane jellyfish, as we saw, up to almost a couple of meters wide. Okay, so you don't need to learn all of these terms. We've already come across most of them: the subumbellar side, the exumbellar side, the stomach or gastrovascular cavity or gut. There's the manubrium, mouth, oral tentacles. Okay, and let's see. These things are either male or female. The gonads are within the stomach, and they are a little bit more complex in that they have developed these things called statocysts. So here's what a statocyst is. Okay, we'll go over this in class a little bit more, but there is something called a statolith, which is right here, and that is this rock-like form in the middle. And depending on which direction gravity is pulling it, it's stimulating these sensory hairs, these nerve fibers here. And when those are stimulated, it can help the jellyfish decide whether it's going up or down or sideways through the water column. And if they're going to be hunting, often they like to stay towards the surface where all the light is and all the primary productivity is, where all the food is. Now, Scyphozoans can have a very complex life cycle, and sometimes they go back and forth between the benthic phase and the planktonic phase. So it's possible that the egg here will develop into a planular larva, and that planular larva can go straight back to a adult medusa form. However, in some species, they will then go and settle and look much like a hydrozoan or a anemone on the bottom. and they'll grow, they'll capture food, and they grow these little discs. Okay, so disc, and then another disc, and another disc, and then another disc. And when there's a cue in the environment that tells the jellyfish or this strobilia, this benthic form, that it's time to release these the young, because there's a lot of food in the water and they'll have a good chance of survival. These things can just make all of these little stacks of new offspring when and they can just keep making those until the environmental conditions are right. There's a bloom of whatever their prey is in the water, and then off these little young phyra go, which are sort of juvenile jellyfish that will then develop into an adult. Okay? And so the cycle can go back and forth between the benthic and the planktonic stages. Okay, this is what we just covered. However, you can go slowly through this, stop the video, and read through these in order to take notes. Here's a picture of a whole bunch of Scyphostoma ready to release their phyra. And here is a better picture, the one that I didn't take, the ones that I didn't take. Here is the phyra that's just released. Here they are stacked up in these on the Scyphostoma, and here you can see tangled masses of these. So when the environmental conditions are correct and it's time to release these, you can see how you get a massive bloom of jellyfish with all of these things, just with each one of these developing into an adult jellyfish. There's just a huge eruption of jellyfish, and so that is a way of having your reproduction, giving your offspring the best chance of survival.